Boker Tov.
Good, thank you. Thank you. So we started the Gemara yesterday about the third issue of the Mishnah, Machlokes B'Shama B'Hillel, about the shechting a chaya or oaf on Yantif, which needs kisi adam, and you don't have off already. There's a din kisi adam when you shecht either a chaya, kind of a deer, the kinds of deer, or a bird. You have to cover the blood. We had yesterday also agav that you have to cover them also on the bottom. The first earth, or earth on the bottom or earth on top. So are you allowed to dig in order to be able to do kisi adam? The first Pshat the Mishnah says that according to Beishama you're allowed to, according to Beis Hillel you're not allowed to, lechatchila, but you have it if you shechted, so in order to do the mitzvah, so you are allowed to. But now the Gemara throws in a whole different factor that they wouldn't have seen in the Mishnah, and there's 3 lines from the bottom. If you did shech already, Beis Hillel's moda that you could dig with a dagger, a spade, a shovel, and cover the blood. That's only provided that you happen to have the shovel that's already thrust into the ground before Yom Tov. What does that accomplish? So it seems that Pashup Shan the Gemara, Rashi, that's going to accomplish that it doesn't make it muksa. The earth is not muksa. There's a muksa issue that the earth is muksa by having the decker notes ready to go. So that is a way of designating it, and the earth is not muksa. But Beis Hillel would not permit you to dig if you're going to have to violate the issue of muksa. So it has to be that the earth is designated to be used for this purpose, even though it's still in the ground. The fact that the shovel is already thrust in the ground, that designates that earth which is ready to be picked up. We'll see a couple of lines, and we'll have a summary of what the issues are over here. The first issue the Gemara talks about is muksa, and that the Gemara says Beis Hillel is not going to be mata muksa, even b'diavad. But if you designated it by thrusting the shovel before Yom Tov, so then it's very designated, it's not muksa. Next problem, you have to crumble the earth. That means if you have just a clump of earth and put it on top of the blood, that's not called covered. It has to be, how would you call it? Mefuzar. It has to be spread out. So it has to be not a clump of earth. You have to crush it, and that also is considered a malacha. That's tochen. Rashi says that's grinding. So the fact that you just the muktzah problem was taken care of, you didn't take care of the problem of grinding. On the next page now, I'm sorry, I missed that. You're right, only if it's like sand. Means what we would call sand, that it's not earth which is clumped together and you have to crush it in order to spread it out. It's already soft earth. And if it's going to be a clump of earth, you're not allowed to because it'll be Esod HaRaisa. We're not going to permit Esod HaRaisa. And the third problem is you're digging a hole. Isn't that also a problem with Hofer? That's digging. It's considered either Bona or Choresh, one of the two. Either if it's in a place where it's inside the house, it's considered Bona. If it's outside, it's considered plowing. So, but with Guma, you're making a hole. That solves the problem. The answer is that since you're not doing it for the hole, you're doing it for the earth. So if someone digs a hole on Shabbos and he doesn't need the hole, he needs the earth, so he's pater. So this is called malacha she'en tzricha legufa, that you're doing the malacha, you're doing the act of the malacha with the intention, but you're not doing it with the intention that the malacha is done for. Usually when you dig, you're digging because you want the hole, either for the house, the bona, or for the outside choresh. But if you want the earth, that's called malacha she'en tzricha legufa. Rashi brings down the Gemara on Shabbos that says, well, Rashi doesn't call Shabbos, he calls Chagiga, but the Gemara says that even according to Rabbi Yehuda, who holds malacha she'en tzricha legufa is chayiv, here you put it because it's called mekalkel. If you don't need it for building or for choresh, so then it's just mekalkel. You're doing it. You're ruining. You make a hole in your house.
Oh, he's doing a mitzvah with the sand, so he has a purpose.
No, the question. No, we're talking about the earth. The earth that he dug out. Right. So the hole is a hole over there
to cover the blood. So
but there's a hole. There's a hole in the ground. That means as far as the malacha of making a hole, there's no malacha deraisa being done because he's mekalkel. First of all, he's not doing it for the hole. So it's malacha she'en tzricha legufa. And even if malacha she'en tzricha legufa is chayiv, he is pater because it's mekalkel. He's doing it for a good purpose, but he's making a hole in the floor. The hole in the floor is
I don't hear anything for a minute and a half already.
Yeah, we can see that the Rav, he has to come back on. He's not here. We're up to where it says Guma, is that right? V'haka vid Guma. That's a problem, is that he's making a hole, and that's like a kasha that they're asking.
Okay, we're on again. When did we get cut off?
We were talking about Haka vid Guma, and I think that was a kasha. Is that correct? It was a kasha that he's making a hole.
Yeah, top line, well, COVID Guma, that you're making a hole. There's another problem here besides muksa and tochen of crumbling up the clump of earth. There's also making a hole. The more answers can be that if somebody digs a hole, not for the hole, he digs the hole because he wants the earth, and the hole is just made by itself automatically. So that's not daraisa. The reason for that is because it's malacha shein tzricha legufa, that you're doing it not for the purpose of the malacha, you're doing it for a different purpose, and therefore it's a point of Shimon Potter. And the Gemara in Shabbos says, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, this is also makalkel. The fact that you're making a hole in the earth where you don't need a hole, so that's considered you're just doing a destructive kind of act. It's not constructive, so therefore it's also not deraisa. So to sum up the Gemara, there are three issues here about digging the earth in order to cover up the blood. One issue would be muksa. The earth is muksa. Second is that you're making the text in the order of the Gemara kasisha. If you have to crumple up the earth, crumble it up. So that's also tochen. And the third issue is making a hole. And the Gemara says that the last one is only Rabbanan, and it seems that we're overriding the Rabbanan. Rav says that even though it's a Rabbanan, but here for Simchas Yontif, in order to be able, either for the mitzvah, not for Simchas Yontif, for the mitzvah of covering the blood, we're going to override the Issa Rabbanan. The middle issue was about the tochen, that's Issa Daraisa, so we're not going to be able to permit that. It's only talking about if you have Avatichuach, if you have soft earth, which doesn't have to be crumpled up. And the first issue about Muksa, that seems that even though Muksa is also Rabbanan, we're not matir, even with the Eved, we're not matir only if you have designated it by having the Decker notes in beforehand. That's the Gemara. So it comes out that Beis Shammai doesn't talk about, maybe Beis Shammai is matir everything, it doesn't talk about Beis Shammai over here, but at least Beis Hillel, but the Eved is matir only if you have these conditions, that is soft earth, that it doesn't have to be crumbled up, and also that it was Decker notes, that the shovel was already thrust into the earth in a way that the earth was designated before Yontif. It shouldn't be a problem of Muksa. If that's good, we go for
Well, did you read Delmar Rav Abba?
Yes, because Rabbi says, if somebody digs a hole on Shabbos and he doesn't need it, he only needs the earth, he's not doing it for the hole. If you dig a hole because you want the hole, that's the Raisa. That's Chofer or Bona, Choresh, that's Choresh or Bona. But if you don't want the hole, you just want the earth, so you put there. Because Malacha Shein Tzricha Legufa, or because Mekalkel, that you're ruining it, you're ruining the floor by making a hole in it. So that's why it's only Rabbanan.
My understanding of this, all these are not permitted, but if you do them there, you cut them.
We're saying the last case is Rabbanan, but here we're matir over here for the mitzvah of Kisi Adam, we're going to be matir. The middle case, we're not matir. The middle case of Tochen is a problem. It's just the Raisa. It's only when it's up for Tifua.
It's soft soil.
Right.
What about the soft soil?
That's that, yeah, when it's soft, so then there's no problem.
Then there's no problem.
There's no
The only
problem- there's
problem is if it's plump.
That's when the problem of ksisha, of being tochen.
Crushing it up.
And the first issue about muktzah is also only a rabbanon, but still when I'm not to that, only if you designated it by trusting in the,
That'd make it permitted.
then yeah, but again, Basil says you're not allowed to do it. If you have what comes to us with a chaya, he wants to shech the chaya, he doesn't have any earth ready, so we tell him don't shech. If he shech it, then he says, I shechted it already, what's going to be with the blood? So we say, if you have dekar notes, so then, and soft earth, so then you could take it and put it onto the, dig it out and put it onto the blood. Okay, if that's good,
Yeah, very
the Gemara continues. The Brisa says, She'efa kira muchanu. The Mishnah was very not readable. It says that Beisol's mother that if you shecht it, so you may cover the blood, dig and cover the blood, because the ashes inside the oven are prepared. Why is it? Well, we're not talking about that. Why does it have to do with each other? One is on the earth, or digging out the earth. The other one then it says that if you have efa kira, so the shin over here, the shin of the word she'efa doesn't seem to make sense. Doesn't not because the ashes of the oven are mukhan. The idea we understand that if a person has an oven and he puts in logs of wood and it becomes ashes, that ashes he has in mind that he's always going to use it for whatever he needs. Nowadays we don't have the whole scenario, but in those days when they had oven full of ashes and they needed ashes to cover up different kinds of things, to use it for different purposes, so they automatically on default always was all made to be used. So that halacha makes sense, but the shin doesn't make sense because what's the connection? Efekir Manda Chashmei, who's talking about Efekir, we're talking about digging in the field over there, digging up some earth. So what does that have to do with Efekir? The shin should be understood like above. It means for another point. There's no shaykhs to before. One point is that if you have to dig it with the evet, if you have dekar notes and afatihuach, soft earth, so then you could dig it out. And another point to know, a handy point to know, is that Efekir is mukhan. That whatever, if people have an oven and they have ashes over there, so everybody should realize that they have ashes available, and those ashes are not muktzah. You're allowed to use it for covering up the blood.
Well, that's an easy way out. Just have that.
Yeah, if you have that, then you're fine. If you have that's called mukhan. It says, Beisol says, if you don't have afa mukhan, so then don't shech. But the Mishnah is reminding us everybody has afa mukhan. Most people have efer. Efer kira is also considered mukhan. Don't think that it's not designated. Everybody has in mind, back of their head, that they should use the efer for whatever they need. So therefore, you'd be allowed to use the ashes to cover up the blood. The Gemara talks a little bit now about this efer kira, the ashes that you have in your oven. Top line, these ashes you have in your oven, where did it come from? If the fire was before Yontif, you had something burning in, you had the fire burning in the oven before Yontif, it became ashes. Those ashes are not muktzah. But if you burn something, you burnt the fire, you lit the fire on Yontif in a way that the ashes became now. When Yontif came in, it was a log of wood, and now it's ashes. That's no log, and that's surely muktzah. So then it's not going to be hefty. You can't use the Ephraim Kira if it just was burnt into ashes on Yantif. It has to have been burnt into ashes before Yantif. If the ashes are still hot in a way that you could use it to cook something, that they're still hot ashes, it's not burnt out, and you could use it to roast an egg in, so then it's still considered firewood. It's not considered yet ashes that are past the issue of firewood. It's still firewood. It's still being used as firewood, that use it as a fire. So then you could also cover the blood with it. Not because it's not nolad. Nolad is that yesterday it was firewood, and today it's tam ashes that I used to died out ashes that I used to cover things up, like earth. Then it's a problem of nolad.
Permission to use hot dirt or
Hot ashes.
Hot ashes, yeah. This is more like it's a cooking process.
That's what he's saying. That yeah. So even so, I'm surprised.
No, I mean, we never. When you're saying that you have to cover it with dirt, no, there's no. I'm not sure that you should use something.
But you could.
Straight out of another.
So you could use hot ashes to cover the blood. Also, you don't have to. You could. And the chiddush of the Gemara is that it's not considered nolad as far as muktzah. If it would be dyed out ashes, so now it's not any more cooking material. Now it's not fuel. Now it's just earth that you used to cover things with. So then it's nolad. Before it was firewood, and now it's ashes that are not usable anymore for cooking. But if it's still hot, they're hot ashes. So then it's still considered not muktzah because it's not nolad. It's still the original thing. It's firewood. You could take this firewood and fire ashes and put it onto the blood, and it's not muktzah because it's still the original thing. Tani Nama Yachim, we learned the Bryce that says so. Kishamu Efekir Mukhanu, Amu Ela Shusik Mev Yamtef, Apalusik Yamtef Asa, in my list of Bobeitza, Mamish word for what he said before, what Rav said, that it's only mutter, it's only, the ashes only mutter if it was burnt, the ashes were burnt to ashes before Yamtef, then it's already Omer from before Yamtef, but if it was, the logs were burnt on Yamtef, so it's Asa. But if it's still right to cook an egg in it because it's still hot ashes, then it's still mutter because it's not, it didn't change into something else. The Bryce ends off. And the other point, somebody took an earth in order with the intention of putting it into his garden or into his chorba. The chorba means some kind of a broken, ruined building that he has to fix up. Like some building material, he brought in a bag of earth, either to put into his garden or to put into or to build with. So you might think that it's muksa because earth that you put into your garden is muksa, and earth that you build with, the sand you build with, is also muksa. But mutar l'chasas bo. So Rashi says because everybody when they bring in this bag of earth, they have in mind that until they use it, they'll use it for anything that they need. Nowadays we don't have this purposes too much, but we don't use earth to cover things up. But in those days they did, and therefore. Somebody has always in the back of his mind, this earth, until I use it, I'll use it for my purposes. So it's not muksa, it's designated to be used.
With the hot ashes, is that a problem with muksa?
The hot ashes are not muksa on Yom Tov.
I'm talking about bishul.
The connection is not so good.
Oh, 1 second. Would be a
I think
problem
he
with
said,
bishul. Bishul of the blood.
Did anybody hear?
Yeah, no, he's somebody else was talking.
bishul of the blood, is that a problem?
Why should it be a problem?
If it had harder to cook an egg, it's harder to cook the blood.
Oh, is there a problem to cook the blood? The fact that you're cooking the blood, is while you're covering, it's getting cooked.
Yeah.
Is there? Maybe I don't know more than it says. So it seems that it's not a problem, even though as you're covering the blood, it's getting cooked. Is that an issue? Is that a problem that you cook the blood while you covered it up? It seems not, but I don't have any kasha, but I don't know. I'm not connected to every. So 1 second, please, if everybody can hold on. Maybe it won't be hard to connect it, right? I'll just put it right. Connected. 1 second, please. How do I do this? I'm trying to see how network Wi-Fi. Edimax 1.1. So how do I? What do I look at over here? Network. How do I see the option? Add connection. No. Very good. Okay. I did that, right? Okay, the Gemara continues. The Amar of Yehuda, Machis Adam Alokim Pasal Alpha Vosa Vokal Tzoko. We have this Masechah Shabbos that a person could take in a box of earth and do whatever he wants to with it. That means that he could designate it. He could take earth and designate it. Over there, the Gemara in Shabbos says the Chiddush is that even though he didn't do anything, usually you have to do a Maisa or Machshe, you have to do a Maisa to it. And the Gemara means a focus over there in order to designate like different kinds of things, the different kinds of designation. So if you just said something which everybody agrees that something which you can't do any Maisa to, there's nothing to do to it. You just have to designate it. That's a good designation and it's not Muksa. Which is very similar to what the Bryce said a second ago, that if you take an earth to Yagina, Churba, it's also Mutter. So the same thing, as long as you designate it to be used for your purposes, so it's not Muksa. You can take earth, which is Muksa, and you designate it, you say this I'm going to use for other purposes, and therefore it's not Muksa. Darash Mazutri Mishmei Mazutri Rabba, Ushich Lo Keren Zav. So it's only provided that you put it in a special corner. It means if you take a box of earth and you empty it out in the middle of the floor, so then it's going to get trampled on and it's going to become part of the floor, and it's not designated for your uses. Then it's earth like anything else. But if you put it into a corner and you said, of course, if it's in the box, it's really good. But even if you emptied it out, as long as it's in the corner, so then it means that it's designated for your uses, whatever you need to cover up things. If there's going to be some filth, you'll take to cover it up, spit, whatever it might be. So then it's not muktzah. As long as it was a yuchad or keren zavis.
What did it come to answer? Or they're just
We're trying to say how to designate earth. You just designate it, you put it in the side, and you say this earth. Before Yom Tov, before Shabbos, before Yom Tov, you put it inside and you say this is going to be designated, it's good enough. Even though you didn't do any action to it, you didn't do anything to it, it's not muktzah. The Gemara brings an issue about a koi. The rest of the day today is going to be about a koi. A koi is a kind of an animal that we're not sure if it's a chayi or a behemoth. What animal is it exactly? I don't know. But it's an animal which it might be a crossbreed also to talk about. But as far as our halachic issue today, a koi is a animal which we're not sure if it's a chayi or a behemoth. So just as far as our halachas, only a chayi is chayiv kisei adam. A behemoth is not chayiv kisei adam. When you go to the slaughterhouse where they shecht cows, sheep, and goat, there's no covering of the blood. The blood is just flowing over there. But if you have a deer, or you go to a place where they shecht poultry, so over there they do have to cover the blood. So this koi is the animal that you shecht, and it's kosher, but it's a question if it's a chayi or behemoth. Do you have to cover the animal? Do you have to cover the blood? So we don't, it's a suffix, therefore you're supposed to cover it with suffix. Since we don't know, so cover it. But now there's an issue about Yantif. The whole issue of the Gemara is going to be on Yantif, is that going to be worse? Is there more of a problem by a koi on shechting on Yantif because the covering of the blood issue more than chaya, which definitely is supposed to be covered. So here the Brisa starts, koi ein shachtan osam Yantif, and shachtan ein b'chasin es damo. A regular chaya, the Mishnah said on that base, the first Mishnah said that you're not supposed to, they still says if you don't have earth available, so don't shecht the chaya on Yantif. If you did with the Eved, so in order to do the mitzvah, so then you may yachbar b'deka v'yachasa, as we said, if you have a deka nos, if you have the shovel is already thrust into the ground, so then we said, but the Eved you could the chatchila now. And here the Brisa says even the Eved now. It says first of all, the koi don't shecht it on Yantif. As you know, also a chiddush, I'm always going to see a chiddush in that also, not only in the sefer, but the sefer surely a chiddush. It says even the Eved you're not allowed to. So you're not allowed to shecht the koi on Yantif. And the Gemara thinks that at this point, the Gemara thinks the reason is because some issue of the earth, that you don't have earth which is able to cover it with. And that's what the Gemara is going to go into the sugya. Why is it not possible to have designated earth? That's not muktzah.
What's it? We don't know that.
The Isa, if it's true, Gemara is asking against Rav Yehuda, if it's true that you could designate earth, that it shouldn't be muktzah, l'chasya k'Rav Yehuda. Why not cover it up to have earth which is designated? If the whole problem is because you don't have a designated earth, so designate the earth. But tomorrow, right away, the answers back. Of course, the case is here that you don't have. And am I the only one who said, Rav Yehuda is the only one who said that it's possible to designate earth, make it non-muktzah? There's Eifakira. The Mishnah itself says Eifakira is considered mukhan. And Dekanotz, the Mishnah also says, is a case to have possible, shouldn't be muktzah, you designated the earth. So I didn't say anything. I just said there's another way to do it. But everyone agrees there's a way to have Eifak mukhan. So why ask Kasha on me for? If the case is, you can't shecht because you don't have earth. So what if you have earth? Then you could shecht it. Leslie, it's talking about you don't have this kind of earth. You don't have Eifakira, you don't have a Famuchan, you don't have Dekanotz. So also, you don't have my case also. But you could designate. If you'd have designated earth before, you'd be able to shecht the koi. The case is, if you don't have designated earth, then you're not allowed to shecht the koi. The Gemara says, if that's so, if there's no designated earth, you don't have a Dekanotz, yourself suffix, I feel about the namilo, then even a chaya. The Mishnah, the Brisa here sounds like a koi. Since it's a suffix, you're not allowed to shecht it. But if you don't have any earth available, then even a chaya, which is definitely chayiv in kisei adam, also you're not allowed to shecht. That's what the Mishnah says. The Mishnah says that the Beis Hillel says don't shecht a chaya if you don't have only if you have the alpha mukhan. So what's the chiddush to say that you shouldn't shecht the koi? You're not allowed to shecht the chaya vadai also. The Gemara says, "Lo mi boya kama." You're right. Surely you're not allowed to shecht the chaya, but there's a chiddush. You're not allowed to even shecht the koi. The Gemara is going to flip this svara. There might be more svara that you should be allowed to shecht the koi than the chaya. You might think that if it's a vada, it's a deer, it's a chaya, that's surely chayiv in kisei adam, then don't shecht it because you're not going to be able to do kisei adam. But if it's a suffix, so maybe shecht it and don't do kisei adam. Leave the blood over there. It's true. You're not going to be able, it's not more heter to cover the blood. On the contrary, it's less reason to cover the blood. But there's maybe more reason you should be allowed to shechted and not cover it. Leave it there. Because it's only a suffix if it's chayv in kisi adam. So maybe for the simchas yantif, in order to be able to have meat, will allow you to shecht it without doing kisi adam. The mashmalan, that even though it's only a suffix, also don't shecht. So what did the Gemara say? That it's true, both by a chaya and by a suffix, you're not allowed to shecht on yantif if you don't have earth ready. If you have earth ready, no problem. You have the earth, shecht, and take the bag of earth and put it on the blood. But the case is you don't have any earth. So both of them are also to shecht because you're not going to be able to cover the blood. But there's a chiddush more that you're not allowed to even shecht a koi, even though it's a suffix. And you might think shecht and leave the blood uncovered until after yantif, whatever. Then if it's still around, you can still cover it. But maybe shecht without covering in order not to miss out on eating meat on yantif. And it's only a suffix if you're missing out on the mitzvah. Maybe it's not maybe it's kisi adam. Kamashman, even that you shouldn't do, and surely a chaya you shouldn't do because it's definitely missing out on kisi adam. So far the Gemara got through the first part of the brisa that a koi is also if you have no earth to cover it, even a koi, not only a chaya bada, even a koi.
Rabbi, just out of curiosity, both of these, the covering of the blood of the chaya is the raisa.
Yes.
The raisa, just like simchas regular is the raisa, but that can be interpreted what that is. I'm saying you have simchas on the one side you have the kisa dam of the other chaya, and on the side of the say you have simchas regular.
But you know,
it's also the raisa.
but you don't say asay doch asay. There's no say.
Rebbe, you
Yes,
were presenting Kisu Adam as missing out on the mitzvah. It's not an Avera though. You're not over.
It's mitzvah saseh. I mean, you're transgressing a mitzvah saseh. Maybe I made it sound too light. I didn't mean to. That it's a suffix if you're transgressing the mitzvah of Kisei Adam. It is a mitzvah saseh. V'shachat v'chisol be'afar. It's a mitzvah saseh. If someone doesn't do it, he transgressed the mitzvah, a positive commandment. But since it's only a suffix, you might think that he'd be allowed to do it since it's only a suffix. The mashmalan that he shouldn't shecht because he might be missing out on the obligation that he's supposed to cover the blood. So I take it back if it sounded too light, obligation. Now the Gemara goes to the Seifa. It says in the Seifa, if you shecht it, even it says don't shecht, and if you shecht it, don't cover the blood. If it has to tell you don't cover the blood, there must mean that there is earth to cover. Means what the Gemara is asking, Rashi explains that even by a regular chaya, it says there's a deck of notes. Means if there's no deck of notes available, if there's no thrust in, after the Gemara explained, you have to have a deck of notes. It's time to take a shovel out of your tool shed and to go digging, that you're not allowed to even do the ever by a chaya also. It's only if the decker is already notes. It's already thrust in the ground before yantif. And then the Beisol says, but the ever you're allowed to do it by a chaya. And now it says don't do it. Now it says that a koi is worse. Now we're getting to the crux of the matter, that the Brisa does say there's a difference between a koi and a chaya. By a chaya, b'diavad, if you have a deck of notes, you're allowed to do it. It still says in the Mishnah, and by a koi, you're not allowed to. And now the Gemara wants to know why. Why should there be a difference between a koi and a chaya? I would have thought it's the simple answer that it's only a suffix. You're not sure that you're doing a mitzvah. So b'diavad, even b'diavad, don't do it because you're not sure you're doing a mitzvah. By a chaya, but the Gemara for some reason doesn't think that's a good answer. So the Gemara is looking, what's the difference between a chaya and a koi? How come by a chaya, but the Eved, we do allow him to take the shovel that's thrust in and pick up the earth and cover the blood?
Because
And
you know that it's chayiv, you know that a chayiv is chayiv to be covered. And you don't know that the koi is chayiv.
right, so I would have said that also, but the Gemara doesn't say it. The Gemara doesn't understand what's the difference. How come by a koi, you mach even be the Eved, you're not allowed to do it? Why not? So I don't know why the Gemara doesn't say it. It's a simple answer, but the Gemara goes further. Elam Rabba. The Rashi explains, Rabba at this point answers that having Efer Muchan is not going to help you. Even if you have Efer Kira, even if you have Efer Kira, it's still going to be a problem. It doesn't mean Efer Kira here. We're not talking about the oven. We're talking about the Decker Notes over here. If you have Decker Notes, you have to change the word Efer Kira to Decker Notes. Muchan Levadav and Muchan Lesafik. It's not going to help you. If you have a koi, which is only a suffix, it's not going to help you to get around all the problems. It is going to get around some of the problems, but it's not going to get around all the problems. If we recall, earlier in the day, we had 3 issues about getting this earth. One was muktzah, which the Decker Notes took care of that problem. And then there's also a problem about a guma and a problem about ksisha, that when you dig, you're making a hole. And when you crumble up the earth, there's tochen. So the Gemara is going to entertain all the possibilities of the problem. The Gemara at this point, the words don't fit so well. I mean, but at this point, that's what the Gemara thinks, that this Decker Notes helps you if you have a chaya. but it doesn't help you if you have a suffix. And the Gemara is going to try to figure out why not. The suffix my time below. What's the problem if it's a koi? It's only a suffix. Why are you still have a problem even if you have a decker notes? They call it guma because you're making a guma. That's a problem. But we said it's not a problem. Barinami covered guma. If it would be a chaya vada, also give you a problem with making a guma. And why is it not a problem of chofer of choresh bona? Because we said already. We said Rabbi says that so here also it's not a problem. That's not a problem. Making a hole is not considered a problem because it's only and even though it's only a suffix, the Gemara doesn't make this difference. It's only a suffix, so don't do it on a suffix. That the Gemara doesn't consider as a reason not to do it. So the Gemara is asking why not? What's the other problem we said? Because ksisha, that you might come to crumple the earth, and that's tochen. Ella suffix, my time of Ellie, you're going to say what's the reason why you're not allowed to cover the earth, cover the blood of the koi, of the ksisha, maybe you're going to come to crumple the earth, and it's tochen. Why not concerned by the chaya vadai? Also, you should be concerned that maybe you're going to come to crumple the earth. We said before, but maybe you'll say that we're worried. Maybe he's going to come. Maybe it'll be a clump of earth that'll crumble. The Gemara says no. There's a difference. Maybe we're not so concerned about chaya when it's a vadai because there's a mitzvah to cover the blood, and there's a klal of aseh decholos aseh. And therefore, even though there's a malacha you're doing on yontif that you're lo sasaka malacha you're grinding by crumpling up the earth, but maybe aseh decholos aseh, the mitzvah of kisi adam is going to override the avera of tochen. But that's not true. That's only aseh decholos aseh if they come simultaneously. The Gemara gives two examples of classical cases of aseh decholos aseh. There's a din by tzaras. If someone has a nega, he's not allowed to take off the nega. And here is a case where there was a nega on the foreskin, and he has to do mila. And by doing the cursed circumcision, he's going to be cutting away the nega, which is on the foreskin. So that's called aseh decholos aseh. And the reason why it's doch is because it's simultaneously, as he does the avera is being done simultaneously as he does the mitzvah, or sadin b'tzitzis. That's the case where he's wearing shatnez, but doing the tzitzis, that he has the tchelis, which is made out of wool on a linen garment. So by putting on the tzitzis, putting on this beggar, he's doing shatnez, but also tzitzis at the same time. So simultaneously, you say aseh decholos aseh. At the time, idna means time. At the time that he's uprooting the los aseh, he's transgressing the negative commandment. He's fulfilling the positive commandment. But over here, what does he do? First, he has the clump of earth. He has to crumble it, and then he puts it onto the blood. So it's in two different stages. When he does the los aseh, he didn't do the mitzvah aseh. He just crumbled the earth. He did avera, and then later on he does the mitzvah, putting it onto the blood. So it's not at the same time. Here, at the time that he's uprooting the lav by crumpling the earth, he's not yet fulfilling that. So he didn't put it onto the blood yet. So that's why there should be a problem. If you're concerned about maybe he's going to do ksisha, there's a problem even by a vadai, also even by a deer, not only by a koi. It's also a problem. The Gemara says no, that wouldn't be a problem. I tell you a case that he does do it simultaneously. He puts the clump of earth on top of the blood, and then he smashes it. So he smashed it, he crumpled it at the same time that he crumpled the blood. So it is bidnei, it is simultaneous. If he says it is possible to accomplish covering the blood by transgressing at the same time, and we wouldn't be concerned because aseh decholos aseh. But by a koi, that it's not so sure that he's doing a mitzvah, so then we're not going to allow him to do. We're more choshesh. He might come to do ksisha in a way that's not a mitzvah. But the Gemara rejects all of this. So yom tov aseh v'los aseyu ve'en aseh decholos aseh v'aseh. The klal is aseh decholos aseh. If you have a positive commandment that clashes with a negative commandment, simultaneously the din is aseh decholos aseh.
So this isn't a din for our koi, which is a suffix. It's a din for a vadai.
Right, that's what the Gemara was entertaining. That maybe this only would help us by a vadai because it's a vadai mitzvah. So aseh decholos aseh. The mitzvah of kisi adam simultaneously is going to override the issue of grinding the clump of earth. But the Gemara says that it's not true because yantif is not only a los aseh. If yantif only be a los aseh malacha, then it's true that the mitzvah aseh of covering the blood simultaneously will be able to override the los aseh malacha. But the Gemara says yantif is called aseh v'los aseh. Rashi says because it says shabboson. The word shabboson means don't do work. It's a mitzvah aseh. So yantif has both Allah aseh v'los aseh, and you don't say aseh decholos aseh v'aseh. It's only aseh decholos aseh. But here you have two things: aseh v'los aseh. Aseh is not a dochan aseh in general, also even not a los aseh. Aseh is not dochan aseh. So the Gemara rejects this whole thing. We're back to first base again. Why are we more machmir on the koi than the deer, than the vadai? If you have a deer, we said if you shechted, you are allowed to dig the decker knots out in order to cover the blood, and by koi it's still asa. So back to that question, why is it asa? And here the case is that you designated it for vada uses, and you didn't designate it for a suffix use. The Gemara looks at koi, to cover the blood of a koi is called a suffix use. You're not sure if you do it, you're not sure what you need it for. Do you have to cover it? You don't have to cover it. If you want to cover it because it's dirty, fine. But you're covering it because of the mitzvah. It's not inside the house, it's outside. You're not, why are you covering it? You're not sure. You're not sure if you need to. So it's considered muktzah. This is an interesting thing, which I don't know a parallel to it, that even though something is designated for a use, but it's only permitted to be used for such a kind of a definite use. But if you have something which is not muktzah because it's designated for a certain use, you can't use it for a use which is a suffix use. And therefore, the case again is only if you didn't prepare earth for this koi, you had a koi, and you wanted to check it. If you would have prepared earth before Yontif in order to cover it with, no problem, you can check the koi. Even though it says don't check the koi in Yontif, it only means if you don't have earth ready. If you have earth ready, it's good. The Gemara is just adding on that even if you have earth which is ready for vada uses, let's say you have a deer, I designated it for covering the blood of a deer, I'm not allowed to use it for covering the blood of a koi because that's called, I'm not sure if I have to cover it in the first place. So for that, I didn't think about, and therefore it's still considered muktzah. What does muktzah mean? That it's out of my head. I didn't think about it. So here, when he does designate something because he does need it, he needs this earth to cover up other dirty things. Does he have in mind that he is gonna maybe need it for the koi? Because the koi, even when he covers it up, he doesn't know if he really needs it. So he doesn't have it in mind. So they weren't saying that it's considered muktzah. That's Rabbi's pshat. Eifakira means the earth, the ashes that he has in his oven that he uses for all kinds of covering things up. That's only when he is going to vada need it. But this is only a suffix. He doesn't know if he needs it. He didn't have in mind for that, and therefore it's still muktzah for that. The eifakira is not muktzah for other things, but it's muktzah to use for a suffix use. Was the Rabbi Latame, we find Rabbi said this thing, he was consistent because he said it someplace else. Rashi explains the scenario is that he has a child running around that sometimes defecates in the wrong place, and then he has to cover it up in the middle of the house, he has to cover up the tzoa. So that's called a suffix. He's not sure. Sometimes it has.
Rebbe,
Yes, please.
on what you just asked about how is Muktzah shaykh by a suffix, Rashi has three interesting words. He says, Lo Rami Anafshe. And that's Rashi's explanation.
Yes, I don't understand what that is because it's not muktzah for what I do want to use it. In general, everything we learn Hilchos Muktzah. We're learning Hilchos Muktzah a long time already. We always say if it's designated for one thing, so it's not muktzah. Once it's not muktzah, do whatever you want. Just today, another out we had that if you have ashes that are still hot ashes, so it's not muktzah, you're allowed to cover up the blood. Why? Because hot ashes is still called firewood, so I'm allowed to use it for something else. It doesn't have to be designated for the thing I'm using it for. Once it's not muktzah, and I can now use it whatever I want to. So this is the whole thing is a chiddush. I never thought about it. Yeah, I thought about this thing. I thought about something else. I didn't think about this. What did I think about this for? I thought about something else. I want to use it for a vada use. So it's not muktzah. And now you tell me I can't use it for a suffix use. I don't know what this concept is yet. But the Gemara continues now to show Rabbi holds in this concept. He says if you put aside earth in order to cover tzoa, you're allowed to cover a dam tzipor. So Rashi says that the case of the dam tzipor is called a vadai. Why? Because you have a bird and it's shantif and you want to shech. You want to shech. That's called a vadai. That I'm definitely going to use it. So it's called a suffix. I don't know. Sometimes if the kid dirties in the wrong place, then I have to cover it up. That's called a suffix. So he says, if you designated the earth for a suffix, then you're allowed to use it also for the vadai, for the dam tzipor. But if you designated the earth for the dam tzipor, for the vadai use, I'm not allowed to use it for tzoa. That's the concept, the new concept, that something which is designated for a vadai use, it's muktzah for a suffix use.
I do have an illustration of these three.
Okay. Good. Okay, that's a little bit advanced, more than our Gemara is going to be. We're going to get there soon, but
Okay.
It is true that three categories good, but to cover up the blood of a tzipor, I said about that, I'm definitely going to need it. A soa, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm going to need it. I'm not sure if I'm going to need it. Gemara is also going to be soon. We're going to see a koi, which you have a picture of a koi over here. I don't know what it looks like, but it's suffix chai, suffix behema, and that's considered a suffix. That's how much 50-50. I don't know if it's chai or behema. That's considered a 50-50. Very good. We'll get to that soon. So this is the Yesod the Gemara answers. The reason why you're not allowed to shech the koi, of course, if you have earth which is designated to shech the koi, to cover up the blood, that's okay. You designate it for a suffix. But if you only have earth designated for a vadai, I wouldn't be used. It's muksa for a suffix. The Gemara continues with this idea. Nahar Beloy. Nahar Beloy is maybe is a place called from Nahar Bel. I don't know. Rashi says it's Rami Bar Buchi. It means the Gemara Sanhedrin Yudzayin who this Nahar Beloy is. But anyway, they argue and they say Afilu Hifnes Safal Lechasas Bo Dam Tzibor Mutter Lechasos. 1 second. Mutter Lechasas Bo Tzoa. So they say that even if you designated the earth in order to cover the dam tzipor, which is considered a vada, you're definitely going to need it. You are allowed to cover the tzoa. So I would have thought the reason is because they hold that even if they don't hold this concept, that even if it's designated for a vada, you're allowed to use it for a suffix. But Rashi explains, and that's what the Gemara is going to be mashma soon, that no, the reason why he permits, he also holds to the concept that if it's designated for a vada, you're not allowed to use it for a suffix. But he holds that tzoa is also considered cover of vada. That most chances are that you are going to need it in the course of Yom Tif. You are going to need to cover up the tzoa that you'll find someplace around the house. So therefore, it's also considered a vada. Not that he's arguing on the concept. He also holds that the yesod that if it's designated for a vada, you can't use it for a suffix. But he doesn't consider it so. He doesn't consider tzoa a suffix. He considers tzoa a korban levada. Ami b'marava. They said in Eretz Yisrael, Pligi bar Yosi bar Choma Rabbi Zera. There's a machlokes between these two people, Rabbi Yosi bar Choma and Rabbi Zera. Ami others had a different version that Rava Breda Rabbi Yosef bar Choma Rabbi Zera, which is the regular Rava. The regular Rava we know his real name is Rava Breda Rabbi Yosef bar Choma. And according to the second version, is machlokes between Rava and Abzera in the following idea. What is that? Chadamar koi areu ketzoa. Chadamar koi enu ketzoa. Is koi this issue about covering the blood of a koi? Is that the same level of covering up tzoa, or is it not? So interesting how the Gemara words it, but what comes out is the question is not on the koi. The koi is not a question. Koi we know what koi is. Koi is a 50-50. When you cover up the blood of a koi, is it necessary or not? So it's 50-50. Is it a chay or is it a behema? There's no 75-25. It's 50-50. It's a regular suffix, yes or no. So therefore, a koi is a given that it's a suffix. But when you say is koi like a tzoa or not, it's another way of saying is tzoa like a koi or not. Means is tzoa 50-50? Is that considered the possibility that you might need to cover up tzoa in the house? Is that considered a 50-50 chance, or is it considered the cover levada? I think we just discussed a second ago that Rava said that tzoa is considered a suffix, and who's that? The Nahar Beloy said that it's cover levada. Now the Gemara says that there's machlokes between Rav Zera and Rava about this point. Is tzoa considered cover levada or not? So the Gemara says the one says that it's a suffix, same thing as koi, and here it goes the other way. That if you designated earth to cover up tzoa, are you allowed to use it for the koi? Before we spoke about, like Lev Yaakov had the shard over there's dam tzipor, which is vadai, and there's on the other end is going to be koi, which is definitely a suffix, and you have something in between, which is called the tzoa. Is that considered also a suffix, or is it considered kabbalah vadai? So
Rashi's very clear here. He says the koi the gabe tzoa can suffix the gabe vadai. Why? The tzoa tinok shkicha the krova levadai.
that's what we're talking about. We're saying this is the issue now. Is tzoa considered a suffix or considered a vadai? The one who says koi tzoa, he's saying that it's considered only a suffix. It's not considered kabbalah vadai. It's the same level as a koi. Koi is 50-50. If you say koi tzoa, that's saying that tzoa is also 50-50. It's not kabbalah vadai. The one that says koi enu tzoa, he's the one who's saying that koi is only a suffix 50-50, and tzoa is kabbalah vadai. And therefore, if you designated the earth to cover up tzoa, would you be allowed to cover up the blood of the koi? Depends. If you hold that tzoa is called korban levada, then you're not allowed to because it's designated for a vada, not for a suffix. If you hold that the tzoa is also only a suffix, 50-50, so then you'd be allowed to because it was designated for a suffix. This time the Rava I'll prove to you that Rava is the one. Rava Breda versus Rava. That's Rava. Rava he holds that it's the same level that is considered a suffix because Rava said that if you did it for a dam tzipor, which is a vadai, you're not allowed to cover up the tzoa. Why? Because it's considered a suffix. That's not negated to us. But dam tzipor also l'chasas both tzoa. How come? How come if you got earth to cover up the blood of a tzipor, you're not allowed to cover the tzoa because the dam tzipor is considered a vadai and the tzoa is considered a suffix. So now you see, it's considered a suffix. So in contrast to a koi, he would say that it's a suffix, and if you would have designated the earth to cover up the tzoa, you would be allowed to cover the blood of the koi because it's a suffix for a suffix. But the other ones who hold that the tzoa is considered more kabbalah vadai, so then it's true that they would say that dam tzipor you could use for tzoa, because both of them is kav levadai. But the other way, if you would designated it for tzoa, you can't use it for koi.
Where is the garment?
Right, it's a vadai.
It's a vadai.
Yes, and if you designate,
It's karov to the vadai.
that's good enough. Kav levadai is good enough as vadai. And the other way, if you designated it for the tzoa, if you hold this a kav levadai, you wouldn't be allowed to cover up the blood of the koi because the koi is a 50-50. All that the Gemara finished, and that also was the first terrace, the first time the Brisa. The Brisa said that a koi for some reason is more chomer than a regular deer, and even though you're allowed to be the ebed, if you had a decker notes, you'd be allowed to cover up your dig in order to cover up the blood of a deer, you wouldn't be allowed to for a koi. And we try to figure out why. The Gemara came out, this new yisod, it's something which is designated for a vada, you're not allowed to use for a suffix, and therefore, if the earth was only designated for a deer, you wouldn't be allowed to use it to cover up a koi. And then according to this Gemara so far, if you had the earth designated for the koi, for the suffix, you would be allowed to. It's not inherently a din that you're not allowed to shech the koi on yantiv and cover up the blood. It's only if you don't have the right earth. If you don't have earth which is designated, so there's a problem. But kisi adam don't, and there's more chomer than by regular chaya, because by regular chaya, if you have a decker notes, you are allowed to, because you designated before yantiv. But now the Gemara is saying that a koi is more chomer because it's only a suffix. So if you only designated it for a badai, you're not allowed to use the earth for a suffix. Now the Gemara comes with a whole new terrace altogether, which is much easier.
What are we saying now?
That the reason, so far we said the reason why not the koi is more chomer is just in case you only have earth, which is designated for a badai, then you're not allowed to shech it using that earth because it's muktzah. But if you have earth, if you have, imagine if you have a koi and you know you want to shech it before yantiv, so you'll designate earth for the koi. You have a bag of earth that's designated to cover the blood of the koi, you're okay. You're not a shech it. It's only if you don't have earth, or you have earth which is designated for a deer, which is a badai, then you're not allowed to use it for the suffix. That's the first Gemara. A bit difficult, but now the second Gemara is going to be much easier. A little bit more information necessary, but the idea is going to be much easier to digest. Just a little introduction. Before we said the difference between a behemoth and a chaya is that a chaya is chayiv kisi adam, and a behemoth is not chayiv kisi adam. There's another difference between a chaya and a behemoth. I allowed to eat the fat, the chayla. I allowed to eat the chayla. So chayla of a behemoth is asa. What we call fat in the kitchen over there, that's kosher fat. They only leave the kosher fat. That's called shuma. But the shochet, or the katzav, the butcher, already took away all of the menaker. He took away all of the non-kosher fat. But the chaylev of a chaya is mutter. There's no issa chaylev on a chaya. If you have a deer, you don't need any nikor. You don't have to take out the fat of the deer because chaylev chaya is mutter. Okay? So a chaya has a chomer that has to have kisi adam.
Ida Nasher?
Ida Nasher has.
They have to be good,
I think so.
but not so by the fact.
I don't like talking about it because I'm not prepared, but I think so. But the chaylev is no problem. Chaylev chaya is mutter. So just to get focused, that a chaya has a chomer and a kula. That has a chomer, you have to kisi adam, and it has a kula that the chaylev is mutter. So now goes the Gemara. Rami, Rav Yeva Omar, Koi Hainu Timer, Teloma Chasinam. I'll tell you why you don't cover it. Nothing to do with muktzah. He says the whole thing is not true. Even if you have a bag of earth ready to do kisi adam, you're not allowed to check the koi and yantif and do kisi adam. Not because of muktzah. Why? Because if you're going to do kisi adam, people will think that it's a chaya. Really, it's a suffix chaya. So what are we going to say about a koi? You have to do kisi adam. You're not allowed to eat the chayla. You have to do kisi adam, maybe it's a chaya. You have to can't eat the chayla, maybe it's a behemoth. But a person's going to see you doing kisi adam, he's going to say it must be a chaya, and therefore he's going to come to eat the chayla also. So we say don't do kisi adam, don't check it and do kisi adam, because the onlooker might come to say that the chayla is mutter. It must be a chaya. Doing kisi adam. I saw the rabbi do kisi adam. It must be that it's a chaya. If it's a chaya, I'm allowed to eat the chayla. And he doesn't realize we mark each way. But the Gemara says it doesn't make sense. In the weekday also you shouldn't do that because the same reason, not do it yantif. Even a weekday you shouldn't do kisi adam. The Gemara says no, that's not dangerous. In the weekday, people say he covered the blood because he doesn't want his coat to be full of blood. He's not doing it to the mitzvah of kisi adam. He's doing it because he wants to clean his chasser. The word lenakir means lenak coat. He wants to clean his chasser, so he covered the blood, not for a mitzvah. So he doesn't deduce from that it's a chaya. But the Gemara says that's not so. That sometimes that's true, but not always. What if he's not shechting the courtyard? He's shechting in a place which anyway is dirty. He's not going to clean up the garbage area. So if he's shechting next to the garbage in a place where there's no reason why he's covering up the blood, only for a mitzvah, so you're going to say you shouldn't do kisi adam because people will say that it must be that it's a chaya and he'll come to eat the chayla. Or what if he comes to ask the Rav? If he comes to ask the Rav, I will have a koi. Should I cover the blood? He's going to tell him yes. If he tells them yes, they say, oh, the rabbi must hold that it's a chaya. I'll eat the chaylev also. So you're not choshesh for all that. Ella, you're right. I take it back. Some of it I take back. The whole inami misafka misfeka amilei rabbanan zil shrach v'chasi. The person is a lamdan. This person who's going to learn this out, he's a lamdan. He knows that it's suffix. He knows it might be a suffix. He's not sure. He himself is not sure if the koy is a chaya or behema. So if the Rav tells him to do kisi adam, he doesn't deduce from that it's a chaya. It's a suffix. It's a suffix. He's not sure. The Rav himself is not sure. So that's why he says to do kisi adam. He's not going to deduce from that it's the chaylev of his mutter, because he realizes it's a suffix. You have to be machmer both ways. That I should do kisi adam, but I shouldn't eat the chaylev. But if you tell him to do it on Yantif, then he's going to say to do kisi adam on Yantif. That's a big tircha. He makes his own lumdus that he says that they wouldn't be matter. It's not right. He's really wrong. But we're going to take his lumdus into consideration because he shouldn't make a mistake. This person is going to say, in the weekday, I understand I have to do kisi adam because it's a suffix. Maybe it's a chay, maybe it's a behema. But on Yantif, Adra Rabbanan are going to allow me to do kisi adam as a tircha, to do kisi adam. So they're going to let me do a tircha only on a suffix? No, it must be asavada. It must be that asavada chaya, and I'll eat the chaylev already also. His wife will ask him, eating chaylev of the koi? He'll say, yeah, the rabbi said it's a chaya. He said it's a chaya? Yeah, he said do kisi adam. We always do kisi adam. Yeah, but on Yantif we don't do kisi adam. Yantif is a tircha. If the rabbi said you're allowed to do kisi adam even on Yantif, it must be that it's a vare chaya, and therefore he's going to eat the chaylev. So therefore we say, don't shecht it. We don't want people shechting a koi and Yantif to do kisi adam, not because he doesn't have birth. He has earth, but it's still a tircha to do kisi adam. So he has a whole new shot. A koi don't shecht even if you have earth ready to cover it up, because people might learn from there by mistake that it's a chaya vadai, and they'll come to eat the chaylev, and you're not allowed to eat the chaylev because it's a suffix behema. Ella, just see it inside. The whole inami misfeka amile rabbanan zil trach v'chasi. And the weekday, even if it's only a doubt, the rabbanan will tell him work and cover the blood. He understands that, so he won't deduce from that it's a behema, that it's a chaya and eat the chaylev. Maybe it's a behema, but it's a suffix behema, suffix chaya. But beyond tov, in misafka, in misfeka, now you read it. Mi amile rabbanan zil trach v'chasi. If it will be a suffix, they would tell me to trouble myself, exert, and do this work on Yantif to cover the blood. It must be that it's a Barei Chaya. So therefore we tell them don't shecht. And even if you shecht it, don't cover the blood. Tani Reb Zera. So we have two pshatim. We have two pshatim in the Gemara. Why not to shecht the koi? The first pshat is only because you don't have the right kind of earth. If you have the right kind of earth, then it's okay. Second pshat, even if you have earth, don't do it because people might learn from that the chaylev is mutter and really the chaylev is also. Or at least misafik. Is suffix. Imisfeka. If me ami le rabbanan zil trach v'kasi, would the rabbanan say to exert yourself and go exert yourself and cover the blood? No, must be that it's a vadai. And if it's a vadai, I keep the chaylev also. Yeah, but he's wrong. He's wrong. But he's a lamdish. So we're scared of that lamdish, and therefore we say taka don't shech. Tani Reb Zera. Not only a koi, which is a suffix, we tell you don't cover, even if you shechted a behema and a chayiv of. So again, the behema is not chayiv in kisi adam, the chayiv of is. And now you have the blood on the floor. You don't know which is the blood of the chayiv, which is the blood of the behema. So also don't cover. Why? Because the one that is the behema is a tircha for no reason. Taka tircha for no reason. You got mixed up. You don't know which one it is. But one is a chayiv, one is a behema. So don't cover any of them because you'll be covering the one which is unnecessary, which is a tircha shalom l'tzorach. Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Yasino. If with one shovelful you could cover both the blood of the behema and of the chaya, then it's okay because you did one tircha for both. If you have to do two shovelfuls, so then don't do the second, don't do anything because the second one is going to be, one of them is going to be shalom l'tzorach. But if you can do it with one shovelful, you can cover both bloods, that's okay. Pshita, of course, it's okay. Even you might think that if we're going to permit him to cover it with one shovelful, he might do two shovelfuls, each one. One realizes the difference, and therefore that's going to be us because he's doing one of them shalom l'tzorach. Kamash Malon goes up. That's the end of the Gemara today. So what do we have? Just to sum up the issue, we have the issue of shechting chaya on Yantif. If you don't have the earth ready, Yaakov Hamuchan is fine, based on all it says, but if you don't, so then don't shecht it. If you shecht it, you may cover. With what?
I don't hear anything.
Yeah, it seems like it's need to find out what's going on here. Are we back on? Does anyone see about
No, I see
Yes,
one says
yeah.
Avraham Citron, but he's muted and it doesn't seem like he's talking.
yeah, okay.
Are you there in the yeshiva? I'm trying to call Chaim David, but he's not answering. Shana Tova Binyamin.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. We got cut off again. That's the summary. The Gemara says that there are three issues concerning digging in order to cover the blood. One will be chofer, which is only rabbanan because one is tochen, and that's the takis of the raisa. That's not permitted. But if it has to be soft earth, soft sand. And the first issue is muksa. That the only matter if you have decker nodes. That should be the shovel is ready over there, so that's been designated. After that, the Gemara says that if you have Efer Mukhan, it's Efer Kiwas Mukhan, provided that it was already made into a fire before Yontif. On Yontif, it'll be Nolad. If it's still right to use for firewood, it's still hot ashes, then it's also not Muksa. You could designate earth by putting it aside and saying, this earth I want to use for my own uses. And even if you bring it into the Gina, the Chorba, it still has to be the Karen Sabbath. It shouldn't be a case which could be trampled. The last issue with the one had about the koi and why is it more chomer than a chaya? And
Yeah, I don't know. It seems to have frozen now. I don't know what's going on. We have a problem with the internet here at the yeshiva. Something is not working, so we're using some other connection.
Is that good? Okay. And then the Gemara says the second reason why you're not allowed to, even if you have earth ready, you're not allowed to do it because people might think that it's a chaya. The fact that you're being toreach to cover the blood, they'll learn after that it's a chaya and eat the chayla. You're not allowed to because it's suffered bam, suffered chaya. So therefore, don't do that. On the weekday, they wouldn't be concerned that they wouldn't be learned out because they'd say that it's a suffix. So both are Yikis Adam and the chayla was also. But if you do it on Yontif, they're going to derive that it's chayla bada, you need the chayla. So therefore, not allowed to shech the koi and cover the blood. In between, and that seems to be the Allah. We don't know what a koi is, all these things, but that's the yisodas. In between, the Gemara says about asay derchalos asay. Agav says that Yontif is asay velos asay. So on that you don't say asay dercha asay velos asay. Also, we came out with Allah asay derchalos asay only when it's simultaneously happening. Not that first you do the avera and then you do the mitzvah. We'll get back in a couple of minutes with the halachas, continuing the halachas, I think, if that's what everybody would want.
Want to talk a little bit maybe about Shemitah?
A little bit about Shemitah, okay?
I want to know because my wife is all
Okay.
where are we going to buy our stuff?
Okay, I'll try to.
Please let us know what we're doing.
Okay, we'll be back in a few minutes. One second, you can start again, please, because it was muted till now.
Guys, whoever can come in for 110, we appreciate it. You say can you do 110?
Maybe.
Maybe can you come?
If you don't need, I would not, but if you need me, then
It looks like, or else I'm gonna have to go out and try to grab people.
You rule out Tom?
I think so. I would think not, but can't say for sure.
What was the announcement?
About a million at 110.